Going on, everyone? John Magic's here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day. We're going to be continuing on with the Red Tape series here in the next video. This is SCP-7545, The Dying Wolf. And this is, again, by the Exploring series. Links will be down below in the description, as always, to this Red Tape playlist of his and to the Exploring series channel. So please do me a favor, if you enjoy this video, be sure to go over there and give it a like. And hit that sub button on his channel if you're not already subscribed to the Exploring series. He definitely deserves it, as he puts a lot of time and effort into these videos and he makes a lot of great content. So please show the man some love and support and hit that sub button. If you'd like to join us when I do these reactions live, as I am right now with my YouTube members, we'd love to have you guys come in, hang out, join us in our discussions before, during, and after the videos. There is a link in the description, as well as a join button underneath the video, to the YouTube membership benefits tiers that I have to offer. So if you've been around the channel for a while and want to take your support to the next level, check all that stuff out and see if it would have an interest for you. Regardless, thank you guys for watching. Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to come in here, hang out, watch this video with us. If you enjoy it, you consider leaving a like and subs. That helps me and the channel grow, and it lets the YouTube algorithm gods know that you want to see some more of this content. So with all that said, let's jump into the video. Again, SCP-7545, The Dying Wolf, by the Exploring series. So again, as I said before, a lot of his videos recently in this playlist have been kind of quiet, so I'll do my best to boost his audio if that ends up being the case. Please let me know down in the comments if the audio for the Exploring series is too quiet, too loud, just right, etc. But anyway, let's do it.
SCP-7545, The Dying of the Wolf. The O5 Council of the SCP Foundation is a unique bunch in almost any canon featuring them. They pretty much run one of the most powerful organizations on the planet, and are often anomalous themselves, with the most common aspect usually being their longevity.
Indeed.
These are individuals that likely can relate to very, very few other people in the world, other than each other, so it's not surprising that some of them would bond with others on the Council. SCP-7545 features the relationship between two friends on the Council, O51 and O511, in the wake of one of their deaths. His life was complicated, as was their friendship, but death is never an easy thing to tackle.
I would assume it would also be kind of difficult for someone in their situation too, right? Like, they've probably been an O5 council member for a very long time and have interacted and worked with this person for a very long time, and whether they like them, hate them, etc., it would still be probably a significant thing to no longer have that person around anymore when you've been used to them, you know?
I'll note that this article takes place within the Red Tape canon, although knowledge of any of the other articles is not necessary. Let's begin. SCP-7545 is Sanctum 11, an underground bunker complex owned by O511 from 1919 up until his death in 1998.
Interesting.
As sanctums are built as extended, safe work and living spaces for overseers and their staff members, it contains extensive accommodations for long-term occupation by up to 40 personnel. SCP-7545-A, on the other hand, is the collective designation for 4 biological machines, genetically identical and visually similar to the late O511, currently inhabiting the sanctum. We're given a transcript of a phone call that occurred between O51 and O511 on April 30th, 1998. O51 picks up the...
So, how would you know if the original is really dead, right? I mean, I guess, like, if you could get a hold of the body, you could do some kind of autopsy, right? And be like, oh, no, this is one of the mechanical versions. Unless it's, like, created in such a way that it is able to even replicate, like, the entirety of the human body, but it's mechanical, you know? Like, I don't know, but yeah.
The phone and asks who it is, but is met with only heavy breathing. He tells the person that this is a secure government line and would strongly recommend that they hang up. 0511, however, lets out a dry, hacking cough and says that they're not people. They're little more than automata of flesh, conditional machines. 051 asks him what he's talking about and if he's alright, as they haven't heard from him in a long time. 0511's voice rises and he says to remember it, that they're failures, facsimiles of him, half-remembrances. 051 again asks what he means and where he is. 0511 tells him to come to the sanctum to see for himself, and ends the call by saying that he's been a good friend. Immediately following this conversation, 051 dispatched MTF Alpha 1, Red Right Hand, to Sanctum 11 in order to ascertain 0511's condition. Upon arrival, 3 fire teams overrode the security protocols and automatic defenses, gaining entrance into the sanctum. Despite containing enough living space for dozens of staff members and guards, the vast majority of the sanctum was abandoned and littered with objects of disparate make and function. The teams quickly moved through and secured the facility, finding 0511 within his private living space and study on the 3rd sublevel. He was pronounced dead on arrival by Alpha 1 medics, who requested and received authorization from Overwatch Command to secure 0511's body and transport it to the nearest site.
Huh. I mean, again, just for an 05 council member to die is like a significant thing, right? I mean, for as much as the Foundation is about containing anomalous stuff, the 05 Council has a tendency, at least in other canons and stories, to use anomalies to keep them alive and kind of empower them. So, for a council member to actually die, and I guess maybe, I mean, we don't know yet, right? But it seems like potentially of natural causes, you know, that's kind of significant, right?
In the process, they encountered 4 of the 7545-A instances within the apartment, and instead moved to secure the anomalies. Upon confirming that they were non-hostile, 051 arrived 3 hours later to evaluate the situation. He ordered that he be the one to interview the entities, along with assisting in the cataloging of the contents of the sanctum. We're then given a variety of logs related to 0511, starting with a statement from the chairman of the Ethics Committee when they were informed of his death. They stated that he was a horrid man, and that even though it's not kind to speak ill of the dead, they believe that once you commit enough atrocities in life, you lose the right to a peaceful death. If there's anyone on Earth that qualifies for that dubious achievement, it was Benjamin.
Yikes.
We're then told of an overseer edict from 1890, in which 0511 arranged for the government of the United States to relocate the native tribes encroaching on the Western Containment Facility. Their claim to the land has been deemed of secondary importance to the security of the facility and the continued operation of the Foundation. Back to 1998, where 051 enters the impromptu holding area for one of the entities, a small, well-furnished storage room. The shelves are lined with World War II-era machine guns, grenades, and equipment. Similarly to the rest of the sanctum, it is clean, but still coated in a thick layer of dust. 10 operators from one of the Alpha 1 fire teams line the walls of the room, with their weapons drawn, while the entity stands in the center of the room, still and unmoving, its eyes unfocused. It appears visually identical to the late 0511 in his last appearances. 051 calls out to it by calling it 11, but when it doesn't respond, he calls it Ben instead. The entity then greets him by his first name, Django, and says that it's never met him before, but it recognizes him.
It would just be weird, like, to live in a place. Like, think about living in a place like that with mechanical copies of yourself, right? Like, not even like actual clones. These are automatons that have been made to look like you and somehow have your memories, but aren't you, right? Like, I would, I don't know. That'd be weird. And then, yeah, being on the other side of that, if you're, oh 05, 01, and you're going to try to interview them, like, how weird would that be?
It finds memories of him on the beaches of Gallipoli, water choked with bodies. Memories of him sitting on the opposite end of the table during council meetings. Memories of the both of them here with their staff, and says that he was important to him.
Yeah.
051 says that it is not Benjamin, to which it says it isn't, and he asks what it is then, like a clone or a revenant. The entity says that it doesn't know what it is, but it came into this world with his memories, and the first of its own is that disappointed stare. 051 sighs and says that he knows what it is. A homunculus, an artificial man. 0511 always had an interest in alchemy, often speaking about his desire to find the great concepts, such as the magnum opus, the prima materia, and in its case, Naden, a method of preserving the soul after death. The entity says that it was meant to be his holder of memories, an empty vessel to fill with whatever he chose. 051 replies that that's a cruel existence, and he's sorry for what little it's worth. He told him not to pursue it, but the entity finishes his sentence and says that he never had much care for ethical concerns.
No kidding.
That's why 051 stopped talking to him. 051 replies that that's not true, but realizes that if it's saying that, that means that 0511 thought that was the case, and he swears. After a pause, he admits that this is unsettling, as it looks just like 0511, and it's as though he's talking to him, but not. The entity replies that it is the only one that does, as it was his last. The others are like it, but they are failures, more so than it. They were not completed correctly, providing a snapshot into a moment of his life, rather than the whole picture. A vessel that he tried to pour more memories into than would fit. 051 says that if it contains all of his memories up until the moment of his death, why was it a failure to him?
And why would he use that term of essentially not being able, what he said about filling with too many memories, essentially? Like, how would that even be possible, right? Right. Like, if it's supposed to be basically an exact mechanical copy of him, and he'd be able to put all of his memories into one being, like why would they not be able to fit? Where's the too many memories coming from? Is he trying to state that he's lived multiple lives, essentially, right? And so he can't fit all the memories from his different lives, different lifetimes, uh, from the multiverse or whatever, into this one being. Like, that's kind of what it sounded like he was trying to do. He's trying to create a being to be a repository for all the memories that he's ever accumulated. And I would assume it's probably like a fail-safe situation for if he ever got amnesticized. He could then go and like grab those memories and get them back. Almost as like a backdoor situation, right? Like if he could transfer his memories into a being, then if he did something that the O5 Council wouldn't like and they amnesticize him, he could then go to that being and get those memories back. And then act like, oh yeah, I don't remember. Haha, you guys will wipe my memories. Lol. That's kind of what it sounds like he was trying to create. Um, but just that line of, having two memories, having too many memories, essentially. Like, I don't know. I wonder why that is.
The entity doesn't know, however, and thinks that he was looking for something more than the sum of his experiences, and it simply did not have it. 051 says that he'll have to talk to the others then, but asks what happened to 0511. In the past few years, he retreated entirely from the rest of the council, would send his secretary to meetings, and never came to Site-01 or Overwatch anymore.
Would they even allow that, right? Like, would you even allow a secretary for an O5 member to go to a council meeting? Like, what? You're dealing with, like, potentially literal universe altering stuff, and you're gonna let a secretary like go in there and handle that shit? Like, what? Yeah, like, if you're not going to attend, why are you even on the O5 council then?
The entity replies that it contains his memories, but cannot tell him his thought process behind the decision, as it lacks such insight. After a pause, it suggests that perhaps that's why it's such a failure, and asks what will happen to them. 051 tells it that he's not sure yet, as he'll need to speak with the rest before he makes a decision. The entity replies,
Interesting. I don't know. It almost kind of gives me, if you've seen Altered Carbon, the first season of Altered Carbon, which, great show on Netflix. Season 2 is an extreme letdown, unfortunately, but the first season of Altered Carbon was one of the best sci-fi shows, in my opinion. And I don't know, just that whole idea of a person being murdered, but because their consciousness is essentially downloaded into another clone body, right? They're able to then exist, but they don't know who murdered them. And so that's kind of like the whole point of the story, is they're trying to find out who's trying to kill them situation. So it gives me kind of that kind of vibes right here. Like, this person's been murdered or has died, not necessarily murdered, but there's multiple copies of them. And so now 051 is having to go through and talk to these copies and investigate what potentially happened.
implies that that's understandable, but warns him that not all of them are as ambivalent about or aware of their nature as it is. We're then given another Ethics Committee edict from 1977 regarding SCP-5549, a D-class turned anomaly after the Foundation extensively applied other anomalies to them through Project London Bridge.
Yeah, we just watched that.
0511 was responsible for authorizing it behind the others' backs. So the Ethics Committee rules that for egregious and excessive ethics violations in the treatment of 5549 and in the course of Project London Bridge, 0511 is placed on administrative leave for a period of no less than 2 years. It's the opinion of the committee that the judgments made by 0511 were motivated by a desire to weaponize anomalies for Foundation use, rather than in the greater interests of the Foundation.
That's getting off pretty light, right? Like, literally, you're just told you need to take a vacation for 2 years? Right? Like, that's literally what it sounds like. You're on administrative leave. What's administrative leave for a member of the O5 Council, right? Like, he just gets to go to his facility here and just not do anything for 2 years. Then you got Sharp, who was his underling, who gets everything taken from him and then made a D class, right? Like, what other fate in the SCP universe is? I'm sure there are some that are worse than that, right? But like, when you go from someone having essentially the credentials to run their own site, and then because you followed the orders, directives, whatever of an O5 council member, you get all that taken away, and then you get turned into a D class for your troubles, right? Like, that's pretty shitty in comparison to, oh, you get to take a vacation for 2 years. Go to your little facility with your clones, and you just get to stay there for 2 years, right? Like, that's a little unfair in my opinion, but whatever.
Well, this in and of
I guess it's a situation though where, like, what are you gonna do, right? It's either you give them a timeout or you kill them, and then you have to go through the process of replacing a council member and getting another council member up to date with everything that's been going on, etc., or just leaving that spot vacant. So, I mean, I guess it then, yeah, becomes a situation of what else is there really to do, which then also brings up the whole thing of then, like, as a council member, you basically can just do anything you want to, and the only consequences are you get thrown in timeout. Like, literally, they he sanctioned experimentation on not necessarily an innocent human being, right? She was a D class. They said she committed a murder. We don't get any more details about it than that, but she killed somebody. But that doesn't necessarily justify putting her through what she did and her end up turning into what she turned into, right? So, I don't know. Anyway.
itself is a significant ethical violation, it is noteworthy to point out that the Foundation has done so prior to the 1920 restructuring. O511's violation was doing this through institutional support and protection of a baseless project rather than through official channels, and with the consent of the rest of the council. His decision.
See, I think that's probably the big thing, right? Is that he did it without the rest of the council's consent. He did it behind their back. He tried to do something without, them knowing about it for whatever reason. That's really what this is about. It's not about what he did, it's about how he did it and the fact they didn't include them into what he was going to do. Because obviously they would have said no. They would have told him, no, you can't do this. So instead of, what is that saying? Don't ask for permission, just apologize. Don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness, something along those lines, like, do what you want to do now, apologize later. That's basically what it comes down to.
Resulted in the deaths of several dozen Foundation staff and the creation of a dangerous anomaly extremely hostile to the Foundation. While the Ethics Committee does not have the power to permanently remove members of the Council, they urgently recommend that the Administrator reconsider O511's station in light of recent events, as there is blood on his hands. Next.
I mean, you could probably say that about anyone on the council, right? Like, well, who wouldn't have blood on their hands in that kind of position, brother? With, again, the stuff they're dealing with, you're talking about potential universal and world-ending threats. You're gonna have to make calls where you're gonna have to sacrifice people, and blood's gonna be on your hands.
We're told of a U.S. Army field promotion order from 1863, congratulating Benjamin for taking command of his regiment when his superior officer was struck down in the line of battle.
Damn. 1863, huh? So he's been around since the Civil War days, if not even potentially Revolutionary War,
And leading a successful charge to protect a civilian from massacre by enemy forces. For this, he was awarded the Medal of Honor for gallantry in combat and promoted to First Lieutenant of the 15th New Hampshire Volunteer Infantry Regiment, signed by President Abraham Lincoln.
Could you imagine, right? Like, being alive during what would be the American Revolutionary War times and or American Civil War times, and living through all that up until what is, modern time, and just seeing how the world has changed, how people have changed, how technology has changed. I mean, just from my perspective, right? I grew up in the 80s. You know, that's when I was born. I was born in 1982. So, I mean, even back then, right? Like going from, we still had a rotary phone uh, when I was really little. So even before touch tone phones, and then before cable television, back when we still had antennas. I remember getting our first cable television box, and like 10 channels was astonishing. Like, oh my god. And then, you know, going from that to then, you know, computers and internet and everything. Like, it's insane, honestly. Even in the 43 years I've been alive, like how much things have progressed and changed.
In the present, 051 steps into the holding area for the second homunculus, a private library containing 2 levels of mahogany shelves filled with books.
Rich mahogany.
A small fireplace, long since sealed, lies before a chair and small table, with the entity seated in the chair. It is younger, but still clearly reminiscent of 0511, appearing to be in his early 50s. Alpha 1 guards block the exits, and the entity turns as 051 enters, breaking out into a wide smile. It yells for Django and leaps out of the armchair, causing the guards to begin to raise their guns before being waved down by 051. He sticks his hand out, but the entity pulls him into a hug. It asks how long it's been, and if he's still holed up in Switzerland, where 051 occupied a secondary stronghold for much of the late 1940s. 051 hesitates, but...
Interesting. So it's almost like each copy is like a copy of him from a different era. Right?
says yes, that he's just working with the United Nations to try and ensure the fledgling organization isn't too hostile to them. The two sit, and 051 asks if there's anything it would like to share with him, causing the entity to look at him strangely and ask what he means. 051 brushes it aside, and instead asks if it remembers what they covered in the last council meeting. The entity replies that they're overdue for another session, but they chartered a dedicated medical site, proceeded through some generic containment decisions, and there were a few discussions on the occult coalition talks in Rome, but it doesn't expect it to become anything significant. With that many cooks in the kitchen, it suspects it'll be yet another organization paralyzed by politics. 051 replies that he's not so sure, as it could end up being a major player. The entity says that he's the one there, so it'll defer to him. As for it, it'll believe it when it sees it, but remarks that 051 didn't come all this way just to chit-chat. 051 responds that he's been feeling philosophical lately, with future goals on his mind. The world is changing, and the Foundation is at a crossroads. He wanted to speak with it about where it imagines the organization going. It replies that that's a big question, but it does have an answer. It's never been quite happy with their administrators' hesitance to utilize the treasures they're sitting on. It says that 051 met the man, so it's sure that he came to the same conclusion that it did about him, that he's not quite human. Those eyes carry the weight of centuries, and although he puts up a good front, his mask is imperfect. He misses mannerisms that other people don't even think about, and his mind works differently. At first, it assumed that he was just a mage of some kind, but that's not it. 051 says that the administrator's every action is restrained, like he has to hold himself back, which the entity agrees with. He clearly has his own interests at play, but they seem to align with humanity's for the most part, so it's fine to defer to his judgment, but that doesn't mean it has to be happy about it. 051 hopes that that doesn't mean that it's going to do anything rash, and after some hesitation it says that it's nothing serious, just a few projects classified under code phrase Thaumiel. and he won't mind. 051 tells it that it knows why they don't use anomalies, but the entity replies that it doesn't agree with it. It, meaning 0511, has been alive for nearly 100 years, and it looks like it's not even half that. They have objects that can produce endless food. They could have intervened and ended the wars that racked the world for a century, the ones both of them fought and lost friends and family in. How can they look at the incredible power they have and justify not taking action? 051 simply replies that there are risks, to which it says to spare it the diatribe, as they've been friends too long for that. It knows the risks. That's why it's not advocating for dropping the veil. These are just its little rebellions. 051 says to be careful that they don't turn into anything more, as no one wants to see the outcome of that, and what would happen to it. The entity...
I still feel like one of these is going to end up starting the Chaos Insurgency, I guess, right? I think in this canon, the Chaos Insurgency isn't a thing yet, right? Like, the GOC is there, the Foundation's there, and, I mean, I don't know where this video fits in the red tape timeline. The previous video we watched, I guess technically was supposed to be the first, and he, you know, said at the beginning of this video that even though this is part of the red tape canon, it doesn't necessarily have much to do with the rest of the story, I guess. But, you know, the Foundation's there, the GOC's there, and the story so far has been about kind of the origins and the, I guess, modern telling of how the Church of the Broken God, the Davites, and the Sarkics come to be factions in the modern time, right? Like, they're kind of rebirth stories, essentially. So I wonder if 0511 here, maybe him himself or one of his copies, like maybe he's faked his death in some way. You know, potentially he's made a perfect copy of himself to fake his own death. But either him or one of his copies, I wonder if they're one of the ones that go about creating the Chaos Insurgency faction, because his, like, thought process behind the anomalies feels like it lines up very well with the Chaos Insurgency's ideals about anomalies, that they should be used for humanity's benefit, not just put away and contained and forgotten about, quote unquote, kind of, you know, thing. So
entity remarks that 051 is behaving very strangely today and asks if he knows something that it doesn't. 051 replies that unfortunately, the answer to that is always yes, causing the entity to laugh. It then says that it just wants to change things around here for the better a bit, and asks if that's so much to ask. 051 tells it that it isn't, and that it's admirable even. He begins to say something else, but cuts himself off, and tells it that he has to go. The entity tells him to go with God, and 051 leaves.
Kind of an interesting saying for a member of the council to use, right? Like, with the knowledge that they would have in the Foundation universes, I mean, it could just be a blessing that they're just used to saying throughout their life, you know? But with the knowledge they have, to still sit there and be like, go with God. I don't know, I just find that interesting.
A memo from 0511's office from 1963, he states how disappointed he is in Director Conway, as his understanding when he hired him was that he was a visionary. Visionaries are what define the future of their organization. Strong men doing what needs to be done, seeing the whole board when most people can barely look at a square or two beyond. 0511 says that he can now, however, tell that that is not true, as Conway's vision is still utterly limited by the prejudices and biases of the old world. The Foundation has the unique ability to exist without having to conform to society's idiosyncratic bigotries, and their mission is too important to compromise because he's too much of an insecure, spineless buffoon to realize that someone's skin color has no bearing on their ability to do the job, and probably better than he can, frankly. He tells Conway to drop the racial hiring embargo at his site and onboard Miss Jones, or he'll fly down and make him. Next, we're given an excerpt from a debriefing for Operation Tangier Cut in 1969. Per 0511's orders, all suspected GRUP infiltrators were covertly detained by internal security agents in a simultaneous action across 8 sites and involving nearly 39 personnel. When possible, persons of interest were brought to on-site interrogation units and exposed to both anomalous and mundane interrogation performed by atypical persuasion unit personnel.
Interesting.
21 of the 39 detainees confessed to being GRUP deep cover agents, and in accordance with 0511's standing orders, since this accounts for over half the number of detainees, all 39 of them have been terminated to reduce the Foundation's risk factor. 051 enters the room where the third homunculus is being held, an observation room inside of the sanctum. It has a two-way mirror that looks out over the snowy wastes, and outside a snowstorm rages, limiting visibility. The inside of the room, however, is warm, and the entity stands a few feet from the glass wall. It is physically the same as the last one, perhaps slightly older, but has a weirier atmosphere. 051 calls it 11 upon entry, but the entity says to not patronize it, as it does not labor under the same delusions the others do. It is acutely, inextricably aware that it is not the man it was created from. 051 replies that that's good, as it's nice to speak on open terms, and asks how far its memories go back.
Interesting that this one has the realization that it's a copy and he's not essentially the person that his memories have originated from.
The entity says that it couldn't say, as it has no
What would that do to a psyche of someone, right? Like, I guess for maybe someone that would be on the 05 council member, you know, they would be in the 05 council, like maybe mentally they would have a strong enough, you know, fortitude to be able to deal with that. Wouldn't you think like that would be some kind of crazy, like, you know, existential crisis kind of thing? Like, I'm alive and my memories and life and everything that I know and understand literally are not mine. All of my experiences aren't mine, it's someone else's. I am essentially just a copy. I'm nothing. If souls are real, do I even have one? Right? Like, what exactly am I? What is my purpose? Am I even real? Right? Like, so many like questions.
frame of reference, so 051 asks it if it remembers the last time they spoke. The entity recalls that it was at Overwatch Command in Antarctica, September 4th, 1994. He had voiced concerns over the ongoing absence of the administrator, and it developed into an argument. 051 tries to say that it wasn't an argument, but the entity says that 0511 thought it was. He thought that 051 was making excuses for him, because he was bitter that the administrator played favorites, and that he had been placed on sabbatical after Project London Bridge went awry. 051 argues that that was his own fault, as he had tried to warn him, but the homunculus says that he didn't, and he can lie to himself, but not to it. 051 replies that maybe he could have pushed him to stop, but 0511 predated him on the council by 50 years. Even though he was 051, they are all equals, but the entity tells him not to be disingenuous, as the position of 051 has always been first among equals. 051 pauses and asks if it's saying that 0511 was jealous of him. The entity says that no, he simply felt that 051 was unfit to be the leader of the council, however informal that position was. As his friend, he had seen him at his worst and lower, and it tainted his view of 051. He resented the administrator for appointing him and then vanishing. 051 replies that he had no idea about this, and the entity says that he was a bitter man and tried his best to keep it under wraps, but it ate away at him. It got to where he couldn't stand to be around the rest of the council, but he still cared about the Foundation, and more importantly, he still cared about 051. He loved him, and hated him, and hated himself for hating him.
Interesting.
051 begins to say that he
quite the dynamic, right? Like, seeing someone who is, you consider your friend, at their lowest point, and because of seeing them that way, you feel that they're unfit to be a proper leader or an organization that you're a part of. And because of that, you feel a certain kind of disdain for them. Yet at the same time, you have a love and admiration for them because they are a friend to you. And so because of that disdain, you hate the fact that you have that, and probably in some way hate yourself for having some of that. Like, I don't know, it's very interesting psychological profiling, I guess. I don't know what the proper word for that is, but yeah. Again, I feel like this is leading somewhere towards the Chaos Insurgency creation or something like that.
Retreated here to a lifestyle of being a hermit in a mountain fortress when he should have just talked to him. But the entity cuts him off, stating that it is not 0511. 051 apologizes and says that he just wishes he knew all of this when he was still here. He asks when 0511 started to feel this way, as they were close once, and then he started drifting away. The entity responds that it started when the rest of the council voted to censure him after Project London Bridge. He was thrown out of the organization he had given lifetimes to, so it poisoned him. 051 says that he thought his sabbatical did him well, to which the entity says of course he did. 0511 didn't want to lose the only friend he had left on the council, and for all his grand achievements, integrating the Foundation, playing an instrumental role in the restructuring, essentially manning applied force, he was a sad, sad man, obsessed with saving the world. 051 remarks that he never really understood 0511's fixation on weaponizing anomalies. He saw the occult wars, so how could he think that using anomalies would cause less death and destruction?
There we go with the occult war stuff. Said it before and I'll say it again. I want to know more about it. Fascinated. I hope someone writes canon around the occult wars, the various ones, etc.
The entity replies that that's because 051 is as limited as he's always been. He came into the Foundation from the 6th occult war, so that informed his perspective. 0511's perspective, however, was a century prior, where disease slaughtered more than the war did, where entire armies were massacred. They were both soldiers, but 051 came from trench warfare and machine guns, while 0511 came from cavalry and muskets. 051 still doesn't see the difference, so the entity yells that it was never about using anomalies, it was about the Foundation. When 051 joined the Foundation, his first thought was, "My God, how fortunate we were that more of these horrors weren't unleashed on the battlefields of Verdun and the Somme and Gallipoli." 0511, however, fought in the Civil War, where the anomalous theater was incredibly limited, so his first thought after joining the Foundation was, "My God, we could have stopped all of this before it began." 051 says,
I don't know, man. I feel like it's a situation where once the cat were to come out of the bag, right, and people start using anomalous things as weapons, they will just become that. They'll just become commodities to be used as weapons and or deterrents, right? Like you look at nuclear weapons nowadays, right? They've only really been used once in World War II, and after that, they've basically become deterrents. You know, so I mean, who knows? But I mean that like that hasn't stopped war from happening. You know what I'm saying? So like, yeah, there would probably be like different factions and different sides that would have big nuke type anomalies, right? That like if it escalated enough, I'm gonna let this go. We're gonna let the deer go, and the deer's gonna go out and annihilate you. Well, I got the Scarlet King in my back pocket, so I'm gonna let the Scarlet King go, and they're gonna duke it out, and the entire universe is gonna be destroyed. But that's not gonna stop war from happening, right? There's still wars are gonna happen. People are gonna fight. There'll be smaller anomalous uses, but it would just like it wouldn't really change anything, in my opinion, right? Things would still happen. They would just happen in a different way. War would just happen in a different way.
Says that he never considered that. And
Yeah.
pauses before asking if they were friends and if he ever had anything he wanted to tell him, any regrets. The entity tightens its jaw and turns toward the glass again, gazing out into the snowstorm. Its face is impassive as it says, no regrets. We're then given a communication from the administrator to 0511 from 1976. In it, he says that it's been quite some time, and he hopes that he's well. Despite recent events, he wants him to know that he has no hard feelings towards him, and he's not even sure if he's capable of holding grudges anymore. 0511 made a mistake. An egregious, ugly,
Now I had to erase that mistake. Little RoboCop reference there.
incomprehensibly large mistake, perhaps, but a mistake nonetheless. He did not seek to undermine the organization, only bring it back to a time when he thought it was stronger and more effective in its mission. 0511 was wrong, needless to say, and the only reason his removal from the council is temporary is because the administrator sincerely believes that he has failed to understand how the Foundation has evolved. The Foundation has cycles, ebbs and flows, periods where the use of anomalies is encouraged, and periods where it is discouraged. When he began the organization 2 centuries ago, they were a loose confederation of alchemists, mages, and scholars trying to understand and use the anomalous to protect humanity. That is the Foundation 0511 came into. After the restructuring and the Great War, things changed. There was a strong sentiment that the Foundation should not get involved in these mundane wars, even if they trickled into the occult world. That is the Foundation they are in now, with scientists and researchers more interested in containment than use. He understands that this doesn't sit well with 0511, but he doesn't care. He is a relic of an older time, much like the administrator himself, but he has adapted to the times, just as 0511 must. His sabbatical from the council is set for 5 years, so the administrator tells him to make the most of it. 051 finds the 4th and final homunculus seated in the armory of the sanctum, with modern and historical weapons lining the walls, including swords, assault rifles, muskets, and a range of other tools of war. The homunculus is standing a distance from the walls, young-looking, perhaps in his late 20s or early 30s. 051 greets it, and guesses that they've never met before, which the entity believes is the case. It sticks its hand out, and introduces itself as Lieutenant Benjamin Kondraki, though it supposes that it's not a lieutenant anymore now that it works for the Foundation. 051 introduces himself as Django Bridge 051, leading to some confusion from the other, so he corrects himself to say Overseer Alpha. He asks it what its position in the Foundation is, to which the entity replies that it directs the recruitment of able-bodied men into their guardsmen and clever men into their agents corps.
So it's like this version is a version of 11 before he even met 01. Interesting.
051 remarks that that's an important job, and asks it if it enjoys it. It replies that it enjoys it enough, as it's skilled work and it's certainly suited for it. After a pause, it asks if it said something wrong, as he has a strange look on his face. 051 says that he's just a bit distracted, as he's meeting an old friend soon, and changes the subject to ask it how it would feel if it was being considered for a leadership position in the Foundation. It hesitates, and says that it would be quite confused, as it doesn't have any magical or paranatural abilities. 051 says that that's not going to be important soon, as they need more of the kind of people they're protecting in their ranks. An overseer's seat has opened up recently, and it is one of the candidates. The entity replies that it couldn't possibly handle that, but 051 says that he's not so sure. It's got a good head on its shoulders, smart, quick-witted, caring, sometimes to a fault, and loyal as all hell. The entity says that it appreciates that, but it doesn't know the first thing about what such a job would require.
If I was the entity, I would also be wondering, how exactly do you know this about me when this is the first time we've met? You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't know a damn thing about me if this is the first time we met.
051 asks what it was doing before joining the Foundation, which was fighting in the Union Army, and says that it must have seen awful things. The entity replies that it saw many of them, as its family's farm in Virginia was razed by shelling, and they were killed. 051 gives his condolences, but tells it that that doesn't excuse anything it does in their name, confusing the entity.
So it's interesting, right? So, like, I guess what they were saying at the beginning of this video, I think 0511 was trying to make a perfect copy of himself that could contain all of his life experiences. And the reason why there's different variations of him is because he's filled them with the memories of different eras of his life during his tenure at the Foundation. This last one being when he probably was just recruited at the Foundation and was still a nobody there. And then, you know, it going in reverse to, you know, the one that had the most knowledge, but I guess as it said was a failure because it couldn't contain everything.
He then brushes it aside and asks what its desire would be for the organization's future if it were to become an overseer. It replies that that's an easy one, as its parents raised it to believe absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that having ultimate power over the fates of others leads to a rot of the soul. They're gone now because no one had the power to do what had to be done. It would like to push the Foundation in the direction of a world where they are no longer needed. To improve the world, not be beholden to it, and to save the people they have an obligation to. 051 thanks it and departs. Shortly after, 051 delivered 0511's eulogy, whereupon he says how nice it is to see everyone gathered here. And to be honest, neither him nor Ben expected crowds at either of their funerals. They've both outlived practically everyone else they knew, with no brothers and sisters or sons and daughters left to mourn them. In Ben's case, there was another reason he didn't expect tears at his death. He could very easily stand here and lie to all of them, that 0511 was an unequivocally good man who tried to do the right thing, even if he made mistakes along the way. He was his best friend, and has an obligation to make the last memories people have of him good ones. But he's not a liar, and 0511 wasn't lucky enough to be a good man, or a bad one. Instead, he was like most dead people, infinitely complicated. A Foundation man to the bone. He saw him step away from his beloved granddaughter's birthday party to order the termination of an entire department. They pushed for the Foundation to drop old-world biases against women and minorities, while 0511 consolidated power in his own office. He encouraged the administrator to intervene in the Great War to save lives, but was also more than happy to sacrifice entire units to deny GRUP or Pentagram control of anomalies during the Cold War. Infinitely complicated, no matter how much they'd like to pretend they're not. Many people here will only remember him at the end of his life, a paranoid authoritarian trying fruitlessly to bring back the good old days he so desperately craved, supporting ethical atrocities like London Bridge, and causing the loss of one of their greatest assets, a money ROM. 051 doesn't blame anyone for judging him as they did based on the things he had done, but in the same lifetime and often in the same day, he was an ardent pusher for change in the Foundation, to support their people from all walks of life, to make them a force for good in a cruel, uncaring world. Like all of them, Ben was the sum of his experiences, born in a different century's war and spending his entire life trying to apply what he learned to peacetime. Some people will say he was a monster, but just as many will say he was a hero. The only thing 051 can say for sure, though, is that his friend is dead.
Is he?
We're given another excerpt from 0511's autopsy report, showing that at the time of his death, blood samples indicated a number of substances which are rarely encountered together outside of their role as active ingredients in Foundation nestic drugs, designed to help an individual remember things. The levels encountered were significantly higher than what would constitute a lethal dose. Lastly, we're given a log showing 051 sitting in 0511's study in his living quarters. The room lacks any kind of digital or electronic equipment and is richly decorated with mahogany paneling, oil portraits, and expensive ephemera. With a nod, he dismisses the remaining Alpha 1 security personnel, leaving himself alone, surrounded by portraits and photographs of the late Overseer, many of them containing his own face as well. He does not appear aware that he is being recorded, and a few minutes pass as he walks around the study, examining the framed documents on the walls. He then walks over to the well-worn leather chair behind the mahogany desk, taking a seat and leaning his elbows on the desk. He places his head in his hands and begins to quietly shake, entirely alone. Losing a friend, even an estranged one, is never going to be easy. While the Council certainly doesn't consist of anyone that could be considered an average person, they generally still are human, and thus susceptible to emotions, whims, needs, and desires. 0511, as mentioned, wasn't exactly a good person, but he did do some good things, as well as some bad things for reasons he believed were good. 051 almost certainly isn't a great person either, but the Council has an extremely difficult and important task, and I doubt that anyone could do the job as required while maintaining objective goodness. In the end, 051 and 0511 were two individuals that could relate to one another. Maybe not on everything, but enough to make them friends. And when you're older than everyone else you know, outliving any family, and working for a secretive organization, friends are a rare luxury indeed.
Indeed, yeah. Okay, yeah, okay. Interesting. So, I mean, it feels like this video is almost kind of like a part 2 to the previous video. SCP-5549 Second Sin. Like in that video, it talks about how 0511, you know, basically without the, it goes into the whole London Bridge situation, you know, without the, but behind the council's back, approved all kinds of crazy experimentation on a D class to essentially see what they could do to weaponize anomalies in certain ways. There seems to have been no real kind of goal or outcome to it. It seemed like they just wanted to see what would happen, and they ended up creating an anomaly that they had no control over, and they ended up losing a lot of people and one of their sites because of it. And then in this video, it kind of goes into talking about, I guess, is kind of, I guess maybe the justifications behind it, right? Like he's a person from a different era and the things that he went through. And I guess it's really just kind of giving us an idea and backstory of why he did what he did, why he thinks the way he thinks, etc. And kind of how he's almost like an opposite to 0501, right? 0501 seems to be, he is, I guess, the leader of the council and seems to have kind of set the council up the way it currently acts. And 0511 is almost kind of the opposite. They want essentially the same goal, but they have different points of views about how that goal should be attained. One, you know, 0501 as, you know, the idea of just making sure the anomalies are contained and, you know, keeping people safe that way, that they shouldn't be weaponized and messed with. Whereas 0511 feels like we should be able to potentially weaponize them so that we can prevent things from happening before they do, essentially kind of creating deterrence for anomalies, etc. But then that also kind of gets into you know, scales of escalation. You know, once you create again, like the nuclear race, you know, that they're the different levels of how powerful of a bomb can we make, all the way up to the Tsar bomb, which is the most powerful bomb, I think, as far as I know, that has ever been detonated. You know, and that would kind of essentially happen with anomalies, I think, in the Foundation universe. You know, how far could we push things? And then the only problem with that is, you know, in the Foundation universe with messing with anomalies, you know, that could lead to world-ending consequences, if not even greater, potential universe-ending consequences. You know what I mean? So, like I had mentioned in the previous video, just the idea of experimenting with trying to combine the 610 and 682 in this D class, like that to me just sounds insane. Like, who knows what kind of unknown consequences that could create. You could create some kind of being that could literally not die and spread some kind of crazy virus that just goes around consuming everything, and the world would be destroyed, you know, overnight basically, and there's nothing you can do to stop it because of the properties you've given it. You know, like, what are you supposed to do to control that? But anyway, so yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's interesting that this seems like it's just a part 2 to the previous video, where this is going into, I guess, kind of the idea of, yeah, just that kind of, I guess, opposites in certain ways, right? Two sides of the same coin. I don't know if that's really the right analogy, right? Because they weren't necessarily opposites. They wanted the same goal. They just had different ways of wanting to go about it. One essentially wanting to weaponize, the other one just wanting to contain. So yeah, I mean, interesting video. Yeah, that was SCP-7545, the dying of the wolf, you know. And it's interesting that even though, you know, we get to see how terrible things were that 0511 did, you know, in the previous video, it still goes to show that there's still someone that cares about him, you know, for as terrible things that he did, and he still had a best friend out there that mourns him. And now, because he is gone, 0501 feels like he's got nothing. He has no one. He has no family. He has no connection to anyone else. He's older and outlived everyone else on the 05 council. He was kind of like, I guess, the last anchor of humanity or life or something like that. And so now 0501 has no real, I guess, has nothing else, no human connection, I guess you could say, you know. So but yeah, that's gonna do it for this one. That was SCP-7545, dying on the wolf. Take it easy, Howard. Appreciate you, man. You have a good one. Have a good night. Get some sleep, brother. But yeah, links will be down below in the description as always, to the original video without my commentary and reaction, and to the Exploring Series channel. So please do me a favor, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to go over to the Exploring Series channel, give it a like, and be sure to hit that sub button on his channel if you have not subscribed to him already. Thank you guys for watching all the way to the end here. If you are still around, it means a lot. Greatly appreciate it. Consider leaving a like and a sub. It helps me and the channel grow. It lets the YouTube gods know that you like this kind of content and you want to see some more. There's a join button underneath the video if you want to take your support to the next level. If you've been around the channel for a while, take a look at the YouTube membership benefits and subs, you know, stuff like that I have to offer. So thank you very much. Hope you have yourselves a wonderful day. We'll see you on the next one.